Hey, this is Caroline Goals, and you're watching PAX 8 Live.
This March, we have 31 days to celebrate Women's History Month.
This year's theme for Women's History Month is women advocating for DEI. And at PAX 8, that rings true.
Shout out to all the women near and far.
Happy Women's History Month. I am so thankful to work with such incredible women here at PAX 8.
As with most PAX 8 events, we get a lot of feedback from other MSPs, and that's very valuable to us, to talk to other guys that do what we do every day.
You guys want to see the future?
The energy is electric. I am having the best time. This is my favorite part about the channel is the community.
A lot of people, a lot of interest, mainly MSP focus, which is exactly what we were hoping for.
It's about you, your customers, and their needs.
We will be here for 2024. Looks like it's going to be bigger and better, and as PAX 8 always is.
Greetings from Sydney, Australia. Happy International Women's Day. Let's inspire inclusion in 2024.
Women's History Month went from 1 day to 1 week to 1 month. Happy Women's History Month. So proud of all the work that women do at PAX 8. Happy Women's History Month.
What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on PAX 8 Live, the show where we discuss all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of. We have a great episode this week. We're going to have Alex Spigel joining us later, and we're going to talk about compliance, which is everyone's absolute favorite topic in the world, so we know you all are going to love it. Don't forget to engage with us. If you want to be in the comments, shoot on over to YouTube, PAX 8 Cloud on YouTube. We can actually pull the comments into the show there, which we think is a much greater experience for you all to be engaged. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all of that jazz. Don't forget to sign up for PAX 8 Beyond. That early bird pricing is a month out from running away. And with that, let's jump straight into the news. What's up, Matt?
What is going on? It's great to see everybody. It's great to see you, Dom. You're back from your hiatus. How was the last week or so?
It's tiring, man. It was an Enable Empower. But it was a really, really good event. Really great combos, really great partners, really great vendors. It was a good time.
Yeah, it's awesome. One of the things you said that stood out to me was just the maturity level, the partners, the questions, the conversations. Yeah. So, yeah, so it's always nice. It's reassuring to me, right, Dom? We've been talking about this together for
it's working.
4 years,
3 years. So I was doing a security breakout, and my first question was, when's the last time, or who has an incident response plan? I got a lot of hands, and then I said, cool, when's the last time you updated it? And some dude said 71 days ago. I was like, all right, when's the last time
that's a very specific number.
Yeah, and he's like, when's the last time you tabletopped it? And he said 70 days ago. And I was like, what?
Bro,
you tabletopped the new version, the date, we're good.
Yeah, we're done. And you think about it, like if you take that question further, you usually used to get 1%, 2% max, right?
Yeah.
I literally had a group of CISOs raise their hand just so I could feel catharsis of having them all say they have an incident response plan. And I think as we get into it, how do you make sure that you know it was 71 days ago and 70? And it sounds like my man might have had a real, or woman might have had a real control over the understanding of compliance and how they then can use that for their benefit of making sure these things continue to happen forward. So let's talk about where that breaks down and where we start seeing violations of trust in certain things, right? And we spent last week with Rob Reck all about trust. Let's take a look at the news. Facebook snooped on users' Snapchat traffic. In 2016, Facebook launched a secret project, if I remember, it was called Project Ghost, or Ghostbusters, designed to intercept and decrypt network traffic between people using Snapchat's app. Like, they literally injected their own cert, right? Project Ghostbusters, in a clear reference to Snapchat's ghost-like logo. Like, Tuesday in federal court in California released new documents discovered as part of a class action lawsuit, which is great, like these watershed cases, right? And Meta's Facebook's parent company, the newly released documents reveal how Meta tried to gain a competitive advantage, including, over its competitors, including Snapchat and later Amazon and YouTube, by applying the network traffic or analyzing the network traffic on how its users were interacting. Now, in order to do that, they had to do deep packet inspection. One of the documents details Facebook's Project Ghostbusters. The project was a part of the company's in-app action panel program, IAPP, which is used a technique intercepting and decrypting encrypted app traffic. Dom, let's just chew on this. We don't have to beat this thing to death, but essentially they injected a man-in-the-middle scenario and used their privileged position to spy on the other apps, the other competitors, and the traffic of a user. Like, let's just let that ruminate. I mean, let's talk about that, Dom.
That's pretty bad, man. Like, I don't even really know what to say about it aside from the hell. Like, it doesn't necessarily shock me coming out of Meta, right? Like, they've done some sketchy things before, but this is wild. I mean, decrypting traffic is a serious thing, right? Like, it's something you don't do unless you're doing it as like a network security function on like a corporate asset, right? Which is a very different story. And disclose it. Yeah, everyone knows. So yeah, that's it sounds, what was it? Was it Temu that was dropping malware there for a while?
That's the great bring out, and I'll also, I won't dwell on this, but Darren Mott came on my personal show and talked about some of the challenges potentially with TikTok, and people use this Facebook challenge as an argument to say, well, yeah, but Facebook does it to us. And it's true, we have this endemic challenge that needs to be addressed in how we are treated with data, how we are treated with these things we need to mature, right? But to use that Facebook is to say, we're seeing the other side of that. There are class action lawsuits. We are seeing people be able to take action and potentially make some change in this and make a difference in this. If you were dealing with a foreign country, you can't do that. There's nothing I'm going to be able to do in China to take action as a non-citizen to say, sorry, your company did something. I'd have to take it upon that space. And so one of the things to think about is we are at least seeing this action on Facebook. So I would say that's the positive I'd take out of this is we're seeing class action lawsuits start to happen more and more around technology things and around privacy. So. All right, let's tackle the next news article. Dom, you want to handle this one?
Yeah, after 10,000 malicious emails, U.S. sanctions 7 Chinese nationals on alleged cyber crimes. Let's see, the federal government on Monday unsealed an indictment and announced sanctions on 7 Chinese nationals for a series of alleged cyber-related crimes over the course of 14 years. The PRC-based APT-31 hacking group, threat actor group, is alleged to have targeted U.S. and foreign cities, businesses, political officials. No surprise there. This is very much a state-on-state espionage thing. To further the goals of Chinese... Yeah, there it is right there. Chinese Ministry of State Espionage. So,
essentially,
these people
as we get into
been
this,
sanctioned, right? Like,
this is a sanction. It's also further discussion, right? It says alleged in today's indictment, the prolific global hacking operation backed by China targeted journalists. You said, political officials, congressmen were discussed, right? Chinese regime compromised government institutions and steal trade secrets. The sanctions come on the same time British Deputy Prime Minister also did the same thing, right? Talked about the same thing and saying China was behind the alleged accessing of personal data on 40 million UK voters recently. Britain also announced sanctions against China nationals because of the alleged criminal activity. And what is an APT? Let's just take this and say kind of what are we talking about here? This news is talking about APT-31 and saying that this was tied to Chinese nationals and national interests, right? And so when we talk about this, we group threat actors in these groups. APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat, right? But we group threat actors in this group, and you'll see these groups have tons of names like Fancy Bear and all these different names that you have out there, but ultimately they get classified as these group numbers that then all of those names get attached to, and you have some degree of this tracking on. And so it's just further action of us saying We know what's going on. This is an endemic and systemic thing. I mean, think back 2016, Dom. Where were we in 2016 as an MSP, as an SMB, as a nation from a cybersecurity perspective? And I guess it just really, for me, roots home how deep this goes. It is actually a shame that this announcement happened during the Baltimore Bridge collapse, because as you notice, the amount of things that could have been talked about this from a security perspective got whitewashed over by the conversation about the bridge collapse in Baltimore from the barge, right? It was inundated in the news cycle, but otherwise I think you would have seen more about this. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, you kind of, in some ways, Dom, were an APT, I guess, directly affiliated. So
the state-on-state conversation is as old as time. I mean, it was, people sending out one-time pads through newspapers and stuff. So this is not a new thing. Espionage is not a new thing by any stretch of the imagination. Espionage is now, I don't know if it's easier. It's more accessible. It's easy to do broad-based espionage. You look at the SolarGate, Russia attribution at the time, I believe it was. It's easier to do broad things, and what tends to happen, because we all spy on each other, like, let's be honest, even amongst the Five Eyes. But now these are now so broad. I mean, you talk about the personal data of 40 million humans. How many of those 40 million humans were actually related to some sort of espionage state benefit type outcome or some sort of mission? Not many, right? There's not 40 million UK citizens that China's going to be interested in. So they're doing so much broad espionage and data collection that it's hard to understand what the target is and why. And that's why you see these reactionary things. And I think we're just so far lucky that it's not become kinetic, but it could. And this is not a healthy thing. So I'm really glad to see that DOJ and Department of State are now intervening and saying, no, this is not okay. We're going to issue sanctions. We're going to indict people. Now, we can't get them, right? Similar to the whole, you can't really sue TikTok. You can't go get a Chinese national out of China, but you can indict them, you can charge them, and you can sanction them, right? And it just sets a precedent. And if they're ever silly enough to step foot in the U.S., you can get them, or certain allies.
But I think the takeaway is that also from that perspective of your broadness, which is true, right? When you look at that count, that can't be military, that can't be a strategic objective, that has to be from a breadth of that, it's that large. And you go back after 10,000
even
humans.
Industrial, 40 million people, that's not even industrial.
Well, even if you took the 10,000 they were indicted for targeting that were government entities, they could prove that they had tied to that from that perspective. The 40 million in Great Britain of voters was voter tampering or voter information. And also, in Darren Mott's opinion, to make reference, his figure is like how many of those voters may work now at government entities or at targeted individual locations and places where it's like, oh, Alex now works for this one company, they have all this cool data, maybe we should target the compliance officer that's there that might have access to the evidence we're collecting about how that data is handled and things of that nature. And so they're broad but then strategic out of that information that can be done with that. So I do like seeing it.
And not to get
I'm really
too
just
deep, there is a political aspect. It is an election year here in the U.S., right? So there is, I don't know that it's voter tampering or influencing like we hear about in the Russia stories so often, but there is a lot of value in a nation state of just perhaps understanding how an election might go. So it could also be that. That could be the play.
Yeah.
And that's happy we're doing something.
A bunch. Yeah. I am happy about that. And you've seen, to kind of cap it off even, Dom, the Department of Justice in October of 2021 drew their sword. Right, you saw the Department of Justice start saying we're going to start doing the Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative, right? That piece of that wielded the False Claims Act. We've seen that. You saw the DOJ with collaborative stuff with Interpol many times. With the FBI, with Interpol, with DOJ, all stealing money back from the criminals. Right, we saw people clawing back Bitcoin from different Bitcoin exchanges. You saw things play out for all kinds of things, and I guess for me, it's this healthy belief that maybe we're waking up to having some type of a response, whether it be all that valuable right now. I don't know that I agree, but I do think it's.
Well, I think it is valuable, right? Because it's setting a precedent that we're not just going to sit down and accept this kind of activity. Like obviously, again, you cannot go arrest people in China. That's not a thing that's going to happen. Right. But even doing the paperwork, which is what an indictment is, right? I don't know if there was a grand jury. I didn't read that close, but it doesn't really matter. they've indicted them with crime, right? There are charges. So it's for me, at least, posturing that this is not okay. And it's not something we've done great at before, nor has the UK or any of the other Five Eyes. So I do see value in saying, hold on a minute, we need to do something. We need to be very public about that something we're doing.
Yeah.
Because that's really look, when we have a financially motivated threat actor, the only way to stop them is to prevent them from being able to get money. These aren't financially motivated threat actors. So the only way you
and they did name humans, right? These are individual humans. If you look at that list of names, and so to your point, they are starting to make this personal and say, if you're going to participate in this, at least understand that there is that. And yeah, that could be a whole other show as a topic on its own. In fact, maybe we just take a note and that becomes a good topic for us to kick around with somebody that's an expert in that space, for sure. Let's go ahead and bring us over to the brilliant words, as usual, of Robin Harris, and then we'll be back with Alex Spigel, my friend and fellow word wrestler when it comes to compliance. So I look forward to it, and we'll see you here in just a bit.
So we are wrapping up Women's History Month, and I want to talk about where are my sisters. I've noticed this, and I don't really feel like it's getting better, where we're seeing more women come into the industry, especially now when we're talking about security, and the technology is going to start going to this whole nother level with AI. And I just want to talk about women getting into this field, because it is a rich field. There's so much growth, so much opportunities, so many changes that are going to result in new career opportunities. My whole career in compliance came out of a bill that got passed because things were changing in the landscape. So we're going to see this with AI, and this is a rich place to play. But the thing about it is most people find their way into this industry through adjacent fields, because that's what makes it so rich. We're bringing in all of that prior experience. It's kind of technology based. It's a little geeky, but we need women in those adjacent fields. So as the landscape opens up, they can pivot and come into these new positions that are going to be opening up. But it has to start early. You don't wake up and all of a sudden you're in this field. You can go to school and get a degree in X, Y, and Z, but I guarantee you when you come out of school with that degree, you don't have the background experience that people who organically find their way into this industry bring with them. So that's why I am really a proponent of women coming into these adjacent fields as network administrators, system administrators, programming. There are all of these different technology places to play, and we need women to play in those places. But that has to start early. We've got to start getting women engaged in these fields when they're earlier in school, junior high, high school, coming into college, playing in those fields. When you go into a field that's male dominated, so I'm likely not going to be around a bunch of other females, because basically you're going to come in, you're going to be the pioneer. You're going to be the pioneer that's going to open the door for the next wave of females that come in. And when companies value diversity, they will find ways to bring those women in and open doors, but the women have to be present in certain areas in order for the companies to find them. So I'm going to encourage, this is more for some companies to start thinking about, but also people with daughters to start thinking about, what doors do I want to open up for my girls? So what kind of careers do I want them to have options in that maybe weren't available to me or that I didn't think about? So I love this field. It is so rich. It is so diverse. It is so much fun. It's so challenging. It pays well. It pushes you to learn more and more and more. You're never going to come into this field and stop learning. And we need more women to come and play. come and play. This is a wonderful place. I've been in this field for, I'm not going to tell you how long, but more than 25 years. And I'm going to say, if you're not going to be retiring in the next few years, you're going to need career options. Things are going to change really fast. You're going to need career options. This is a place that's going to continue to morph and expand and grow, especially with AI coming into the space. And just come and play with us. And if you're a company and you're hiring or you're mentoring, think about the underserved populations. That's women and underserved areas of the population. We do a program with rural communities. Think about opening doors for new people to come and bring their brilliance to the table, because that's going to make us better. That's going to make us better as companies, and that's going to make us more secure and more humane.
As always,
Man, I love Robin.
Right? Robin Harris is fantastic. Yeah, she really gets it. And we actually had some conversations in the green room back with Alex, which we'll bring on in just a second. And Alex said, how is she not part of CompTIA? So Robin, if you're watching this, you might have just gotten dragged into more than you have bargained for just by your awesomeness. So yeah, very cool. And speaking of that, I actually am so happy to bring on Alex Spigel. She's a good friend of mine. We've worked together now probably almost weekly, at least if not every few weeks, in some form or capacitance over the last 2 years, something like that. So yeah, it's great to have you on the show. I don't know how we haven't had this happen yet. Maybe we just need everybody to be ready for compliance for this to really be a real conversation. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do?
Thanks so much for having me. My job is the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Choice Cyber Solutions. I partner with MSPs to help their clients meet and maintain their regulatory compliance goals. I specialize specifically in cyber and privacy compliance readiness. I met Matt via CompTIA, as he just said. We work together on the cybersecurity trust mark initiatives primarily. I'm very involved in CompTIA and everything that they stand for. My term as member of the year is coming up very soon. And I now sit on the leadership team for the new Cybersecurity Global Task Force. So I'm very passionate about getting everyone involved, but especially new female faces. So we would love to have Robin. And I'm coming to you live from Baltimore. Yes, can't wait. Coming to you today from Baltimore, Maryland. So it has been an eventful week in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, well then I withdraw all my wish there wasn't as much news about Baltimore statement before. I suppose I didn't realize you were so proximal. And I teased. So what's the largest thing that stood out to you, since we do have a local there in the last couple of weeks? What do you think the largest thing that stood out to you in this last week since the bridge hit?
For me personally, gratitude, that it was in the middle of the night and no one in my life was effective, thank goodness, and that it was, as mitigated as possible. It definitely changes all of Baltimore operations and getting places. So it'll definitely be a learning curve for everyone involved, and it's sad how many people are unemployed and can't work because of all of this. So hopefully they get it cleared pretty quickly.
Yeah. I grew up in a hurricane area. And when you get into that situation, you kind of, once that happens, I think the gratitude part is what really hits the first. Like just that cup of coffee somebody had a generator to make, right? And yeah. Your buddy down the street like finding gas available, or having something in that regard. And so I love that part, even though this is obviously a little more localized than something like that might be. It's cool that still lands, and that being there and going, man, I'm glad my loved ones weren't on a bridge and it wasn't 2 p.m. and something to that nature, right? So didn't mean to delve into that. But to your point, we met through CompTIA and Trustmark with Chris Johnson, and wound up on the same kind of guiding and steering committee, and have been part of that process. And one of the things that always stood out to me that's interesting is you and I were more requiring a high level of stringence, and also we're very much in the camp of wanting to make people be where they needed to be, not understanding some of these challenges of getting them where they are. And I always found you and I to be common voices asking for more. What are your thoughts on that, Alex? Like, did you find yourself in that position and finding a kindred spirit in that regard? Because I did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's important to expect more from the person or the company that's managing your IT and network. I don't feel like that's an unrealistic request to make sure that they're protected and secure. And I think that it's a confusing road to navigate. So having something like compliance in place to help, create the structure and the rules to help implement these things, whether it's through the Trustmark or any other cybersecurity best practices framework, is super helpful.
Yeah, in the consulting and compliance business in MSP land, like you say you work with MSPs to deal with compliance. When it comes to that, there's two things that immediately come to mind, and we've talked about in Trustmark before, which is, there's the part where I, as an MSP, am doing something for my clients, and that is something that might need to have some form of compliance on them, the way they run their world, the things they do, the things I do for them in conjunction with that. But then there's also this other half of it, which is compliance of how do I myself issue a new account for Dom Kirby to come work at my MSP, and then give Dom his laptop and manage the assets he has access to and the things that he can do and the things. And those two are two different lenses on that, right? And so where do you find yourself doing consulting with managed service providers? Is it both pieces of that? What do you do for them, I guess, in what you do?
On select occasions, we do both of those things. So I have one current active MSP partner that wants to meet their own compliance requirements and asked me to help them with their readiness. But primarily, I work through and with MSPs for their direct clients. And I'm usually able to help them protect their own house through their clients in a way. And I take pride in that because there's a huge motivator if your client needs it, right? But if you're documenting how you handle help desk tickets because you have to do it to meet that client's compliance requirements, then you have that in place and you can use that for all your clients. So I like to help both sides, but through where the MSP can focus and they're getting paid.
Tom, when you were doing this, your thoughts on what she just said. So in my mind, this is what happened to me. I had an 801.71 situation. They came back to me and said, Matt, now that we talked to the client and got them bought in, here's the 97 things you're doing wrong. Dom, have you had that experience, or what are your thoughts on how that helps shape an MSP?
I didn't deal with 801.71 because I didn't want to. I count myself lucky on that. But I think if you look at literally any regulation, and I think nowadays it's harder, like Colorado has a privacy law and so do however many other states we're up to at this point. So now everyone has some form of regulation. I found that I learned all of it, just about all of it, like the hardest way possible by just being wrong. And like, thankfully it wasn't 801.71, so it didn't lead into, nightmare scenarios. Right. But, I actually appreciate the rigor that I've gained living in the compliance world instead of just the security world.
Yeah. Alex, do you find that's a lot of the challenge is really just the rigor? I mean, as he's saying with MSPs and their clients that you're having to turn back to the MSP and ask them to be better on, or can you give examples?
Yeah. That's a great question. So many things.
Like examples, what I mean by is examples where you went to a client and you had some compliance you were helping them with, right? You were co-delivering this with Dom Kirby at his MSP, and you're driving back in the car from it and going, there's all these things you're going to have to fix. Can you give any examples of some of those things that you end up correcting? You already gave the ticket, kind of example of how they manage that. But is that a common occurrence where you're having to shape them, to your point, in that way?
Yeah. Every new partner that comes to me, I have to shape a significant amount. Even if they're mature, they haven't had to meet NIST 800-171 before. So they don't, just because they have the security tools in place doesn't mean that the settings are correct, doesn't mean that the client is protected the way that they need to be for compliance. So absolutely, in my world, it's always helping shape the MSP, whether they need a new tool or they just need to implement and utilize tools differently. a lot of my world is changing Microsoft tenants and resources.
Mm-hmm.
So in my NIST 800 171 CMMC world, it's moving to the Gov environment. So whether that's in the G or GCC or GCC high, depending on like ITAR data versus not. So sometimes it's using tools that they already have, but in a new way, and setting up additional security features. And a lot of that translates. So they're like, oh, I don't have this enabled for all of my clients. Maybe I should.
Sure.
And then they go and they enable 2-factor authentication for everyone or whatever it is.
So one of the things that you do when you start with a new client, let's walk us through this journey. Like, so you have an MSP reach out to you, right? How does this happen? Let's walk me through that.
So the first step is them understanding who we are and what we do. So, we set up a call, they become a referral reseller partner. It's no cost to them. If anything, it's just us helping educate them. Most of the time they come to us with a specific client need.
Right.
So they'll say, I have a client that needs to meet ISO 27001, International Cyber Best Practices Standards, and I don't know how to help them get there. These are the tools I have in place. So the first step for me is meeting with their client to help understand their need, to meet with the MSP and the client so that we're all on the same page.
Nice.
And ideally, get them onboarded. Then I make sure that I meet with the client, the MSP first, understand all the tools they have in place for that client, get a total lay of the land. 9 out of 10 times, the MSP partner has been trying to sell the right security tools and the right resources to that client over and over. And the client was like, no, I don't have the budget. Like, I'm not going to do it. And I walk in and I say, you need XYZ for compliance. This is what they use. Come in with a budget from them. And I say jump and they say how high. So I need to understand all of those.
Let's go back to the jump how high compendium. I think that's a good thing, because Dom, what does that do? It takes out me being the expert in the room and instead makes Alex the expert, saying we need to co-deliver these things, right? Is that kind of what's
love
happening
consultants for that, or outside parties for that particular reason, because you're good at tying that. Here's the business case or the money you won't make if you do this.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm their IT person, so I'm like, here's the money I sure would like you to spend. Like, that's typically where my conversation ends up versus yours.
And the majority of the time, the driver behind it is a huge contract that they're trying to win or keep. On the end client side. So they don't have a choice in the matter by the time I usually walk in.
Right.
But everything I do starts with a risk assessment. So I run
What's
scans.
that? Let's just explain. No, let's explain that. What is a risk assessment for people?
Well, you could ask 25 people and get 25 different answers. But my definition of a risk assessment is evaluating from a pretty high level the risk within the business. So we don't get super granular with BIA's business impact assessments or anything at this time. We do
called her on point. I want to no. You're maybe the first guest that called your own point the first time out of the gate. So I just want to call that out,
Nailed
Alex.
it.
You get a gold point for that one for sure. Continue. Sorry.
So we start with vulnerability scans, both active and passive, internal and external, and then personal identifiable information, PII scans that can scan for CUI, controlled and classified information, EPHI, protected health information, and I identify where that data is living. So the most important thing here is when I'm looking at these things, like how many places does that data live? Because you would think you have one social security number, it lives in one place. I can't tell you how many times I go in and I see that one social security number lives in 10,000 places. And I'm like,
right,
the data flow here is just not working. So we do a data flow analysis to understand how they're using that information. So I can see that the social security card number or social security number lives there, but I can't see how it got there, why it lives there, how it's used in 10,000 different places. So we do that through a questionnaire and interviews. And then we do like a full network infrastructure discovery, both with the MSP and then have to add like the application side, usually directly with the client. So the MSP typically doesn't manage their QuickBooks or CRM or some other things. So we have to do a discovery there as well, and do like a full application analysis.
You bring up a really good point. I want to circle back on this application because I didn't win every time, but I always really leaned into I should be managing the identity on your CRM and I should understand what you're doing with it, because it is a risk, right? You have a lot of personal data in there, and a compromise will cost you money. So it's interesting that you're still seeing a lot of cases where the MSPs, oh, that's not me. I don't touch the CRM, or I don't touch the financial software or the what have you. So that was a really interesting point.
Yeah. So we're still focused on the discovery at this point. Later on, we build out role and responsibility matrix and different things. So it's very clear.
What's interesting, Alex, what's interesting, Alex, is in this discovery. So you went through data discovery. That's a lot of 3.x, right? That should be already done. You went through getting into this kind of analysis of where PHI is, data flows. That's going to be in later parts of 3. That's going to be in CIS. Control 12 and Control 13 has extensibilities of that. Like, I just want to point out that a lot of the things you're doing risk assessments on, these things that are identifying how much data is here and what is it worth, identifying the problems or the flows of where that data is flowing and what it's doing, are all part of a pragmatic security program. I just want to let that sink in, that these are the exact, she's measuring what you should be doing. Okay, I want to let that sink in. Sorry, continue, Alex. You're doing the assessment. You're now back with the MSP, or doing that part. Yeah.
So I also will take whatever compliance framework I'm working with. So in the example I gave was ISO 27001.
Sure.
Go through all of the policies and procedures that both the client and the MSP has that pertain to the client, to understand how they're meeting those requirements today, and go through the technical side, usually more with the MSP, and the administrative, physical, operational side with the end client.
How does that work? I have a quick question, Alex.
Yeah.
The amount of time that MSP has to spend with you, one of the pushbacks I got when I was going down this path for this one client, it was one client that needed 80171 in the very beginning. It was like 2016. We hired a company, or they hired a company that came to us called Anil. And Anil came with all these things that I needed to do. And it really meant a lot of time with Alex, right? I had to spend a lot of time with the Alex. In this case, it was a couple of individuals. But how do MSPs deal with that? Do they just see it as the investment in keeping the revenue for that client? Do they charge for that time? How does that work out for what they're doing with you in this initial phase?
So they'll make some profit through either being a referral partner or a reseller, in a specific case. So there's a little bit there, but then comes the remediation game plan. So that's all of the things that we're going to have to now go do together to meet compliance. And that's a ton of project work for them. That's additional MRR always for them. Things that like tools and resources that maybe they've been trying to sell, or maybe, are just more advanced and they didn't think the client would ever buy, like a SIM, a security incident event monitoring, ongoing vulnerability scanning, those kinds of things that are the dream, but aren't always in the budget or the reality. So they're able to seriously increase their profits through that client once that remediation game plan begins to be implemented.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out that there's work MSPs have to do on themselves that are hours and things that they're going to be putting time into, that they get a free bit of coaching from the lens of their client, right? I mean, Alex, you're spending time with that MSP too. Let's put it in the lens of your profitability and conversation in this, right? And so I think I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, they definitely get to learn a lot along the way. I do my best to make it as easy as possible on them, write all the policies and procedures for them in the address phase, make it so that they have to do as little as possible, but I will not touch a network. So they have to deploy scans. They're going to have to do all of those things. And, we keep a vendor directory of sorts. So like if they don't have a certain tool, I can say, here's 3 suggestions that might meet that compliance criteria. And we've seen work in the past. So I try to stay vendor agnostic. If they come to me with something that they like, I'm going to do everything in my power to make it work for compliance, because I love that they're already comfortable with something and using it well. We might have to tweak some settings or, write SOP, standard operating procedures, or different things. But make sure that they're set up for success in every possible way. So I'd say on average, it's 4 to 6 hours a month of their time investment, and they make a huge return on that investment.
Yeah, and those 4 to 6 hours don't always have to repeat for the next net client, right? Like when you start thinking about it, if they, let's say I had a bad backup procedure. That was one of my things. My backup procedure had Veeam encrypted at the primary location, but did not have encryption in the secondary location, and also didn't have the proper agreements in place with that secondary location. We needed to move it. And so we had to change it. That took me a lot to do. It didn't cost a lot of money. It was mostly operations. There was some money involved. But ultimately, that change had to be made, but it was made for every client after that. It was codified for every other client that needed to meet data sovereignty, data encryption at flight needs. That was it. And so I think one of the things people miss is that going through this process with someone like you, Alex, really changes you fundamentally as an MSP for the better in those kind of micro interactions, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And, I'll write that backup policy or that standard
Right.
operating procedure if it helps
Right.
the client, and then they get to use it. So it's really a win-win.
Yeah, I think that's the part to take away too, is like, Dom, how much policy had you actually written for you and your MSP? I mean, for us, it was a budding thing we were having to go down to meet our SOC 2 and those things.
I mean, you have to define
helped?
policy for me because I had words yeah, I was trying. We wrote, but I think in hindsight it was so operational. It was an efficiency policy. It was a terrible compliance policy. Never would have made an auditor happy, right? And I think getting that level of support is massive, even for your own operations, let alone, like you said, working through a client with this. You gain so much out of that experience.
And Alex, back to that, kind of customer journey. You've brought him in, you've done a bit of a risk assessment, you've gotten some things in place to say, here's our prescriptive action for you as an MSP. You've started to get this prescriptive action for the client. Take me down that, next step of this journey. You've alluded to it, but what do we do next?
Yeah. So we complete all of the remediations, get them new technology, get it implemented, get documentation around it, write them all of their policies and procedures. So to us, a policy is the rules. So here's what you're going to do. We're going to make them together. We'll go into a password policy meeting with, cybersecurity best practices and what the compliance requires. So I'm always going to suggest maybe more stringent than the
and I love you for
some
it.
compliance is required. I'll go in with both, and we'll come up with something that works for everyone because the client's flow and is also very important. So and the MSP's sanity is also very important. So we don't want 1,000 help desk tickets because we're changing passwords every 30 days. So just being mindful of all of those things as we're creating these policies, and then having like routine standard operating procedures to go with them. So in regulatory compliance, you have to, in order for a policy to be active and effective, it has to be distributed to all users. So we like standard operating procedures or SOPs and checklists and different resources to go with those policies, so we can change them as often as we want and need to. If one little thing changes, you don't have to redistribute that entire policy. You just update the checklist. And for an end user, following a checklist is a lot easier than reading through 4 pages of a document. So we try to keep it as simple and streamlined as possible as we're going through these things. Deploy awareness trainings to the end users, teach them how their 2FA is going to work, and how their new technology is going to work as it's being implemented. So it's not a lot of change at once. It's a little baby
like
chunks
bite-sized chunks. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
And to that point, right, that helps them budget better, to your words when we were in this prep of the show, right? It helps them see the bigger level picture, but understand it's got to get there. How much of this is co-delivered with that MSP? Do you see yourself as a very much of a partner with that MSP in the way that this starts to get delivered?
Yeah, we very much partner with them. It's my job to make them look good, even when there are challenges that arise. And make it like the MSP was always doing their job that they were hired to do, but their job has changed now that compliance is in the mix.
Yeah, that's big.
And we're putting a structure around cybersecurity and putting a structure in place to help them better their environment. And at the end of the day, it's better for the MSP too, because if an incident happens, it's on their watch, whether or not they're buying the right security tools or different things. So it's very much a power partnership, and we are able to help them in a lot of different ways, and then help them maintain their compliance and due diligence over time. So like, compliance is not one and done. I think that that's a huge misunderstanding in my industry is that, okay, I got to the finish line, what now? Like, there is no finish line.
No.
There is this improvement and evolution along the way. Every change needs to be documented, and that has a trickling effect, and it's always a maintenance and ongoing project. No matter
Matt,
what.
we need to have a show that is Alex and Robin, and like we'll
man.
kick it off, but we'll just get out of the way and just
we'll just sit back and
could you imagine?
Popcorn.
Yeah,
it would just be all back and forth. So we'd have nugget. Oh my gosh! In fact, we'd have to bring like a heavy umbrella to dodge these giant gold nuggets falling out of the sky, right? Just so we don't get head wounds. Yeah, 100%. So I imagine this in this symbiotic relationship, right? As you're doing this with these partners and driving down that road, I always found it to make stickier clients. Right? They trusted you. They felt like you were a part of it. You had that path. You got a higher adoption rate of tools. You got a higher normalcy and normalization of clients across the board. I would like to switch gears a little bit from what we were talking about helping deliver that to the client, to now our work in Trustmark and some of the stuff that comes to when we now get and influence the very things you were just talking about with those MSPs at a systemic level. How does that help when you help them go to market with their clients, right? If we then go in and say, yes, you need an asset inventory. Yes, you need a way to deal with your clients. Yes, you need to do these. How does that help us doing Trustmark? How does that help the other work you just talked about doing with MSPs?
So I truly feel that you cannot protect someone else's house unless your house is protected first, right? Put on your your face mask before you put on, your child's face mask.
Please.
So it doesn't matter how much you put in place for the client, you still have access to all of their resources. So if you have an incident or a breach, they are affected no matter what at the end of the day. So the Trustmark, as is today, is built to protect the MSP house. And every resource and item on there will help clients meet and maintain their compliance goals one step at a time, and make it so if somebody like me comes in or an auditor comes in, that they have their ducks in a row, and you say, okay, how do you handle help desk tickets? Here you go. Here's a document. I have it ready to go. Instead of having to create these things from scratch, they'll be prepared. The client will see that preparedness. They'll feel that security. They'll feel taken care of. And it'll be really so much more efficient in my world. Instead of having to create all these resources for my MSP partners, it's like doing the 4th or 5th assessment with them instead of number 1.
Yeah, and that's the point. I have not met an audience yet that I've spoken to, and I speak to a few thousand MSPs at least a year, where they have immediately gone, when we talk about security or we talk about compliance or we talk about any of that, where their brain immediately goes to their client or to themselves. Ever. I've not seen it. They either go to their clients and how I'm going to sell this, how I'm going to get them to do the right thing, how I'm going to get them to do MFA, how I'm going to get them to fix this problem, or they go to their vendors and go, how am I going to make my vendor better, how I'm going to make them get better at compliance, how am I going to get them to get better at security, how they're going to fix their broken stuff. But many MSPs never look inward. And if I force them to look inward, they are very honest with themselves about the fact that they don't have any of this stuff and they haven't codified it, and they need to be doing these things in a way that's more meaningful. And I like your point of like this, you can't go protect somebody if you aren't in the right place yourself. And David Powell likes to say it as, you go get fit yourself, then you can go be a personal trainer. right? And you really get into it. I don't want my personal trainer coming in there looking like sloppy jambalaya, right? Like I need this person to be somebody that looks like they're obviously doing this. And I think this is the point where, to your point, thank you. I just made that up. I don't know a sloppy jambalaya, but the point is that you're making them look like they already knew that they're doing this stuff, that yes, I can help sell you this because I've already got my help desk guide and I already have the way I interface. The other thing I'll bring it back to, Alex, is one of the things that I think you and I kind of pushed for and coined is, as we were sitting there with Chris and the rest of the team trying to figure out this, trust mark relationship, this thought of, well, where does the client come into play? How does this make a difference in the MSP's maturity in those statements? And what we kind of codified was exactly what you said, is that the entire summation of the size and risk of the clients you do work for is your risk as a scale perspective, right? Because I've accessed all those resources. I can be the mechanism of their death. I have trusted applications. I have systems I install. I am put in a trusted position. I'm administrator. And so I think you and I feel very strongly that
you
an MSP...
You could step out of that and just, because what I've told partners a lot is if an end company hires you, they are taking their livelihood and they are putting it in your hands, right? Like, and not everyone fully, and even me, I didn't fully recognize that when I got in the business, right? It took me a minute, but that's what's happening. Like, you can literally kill their business if you wanted to, and you could get their business killed if you're not being careful. And I think that's the message I really try to drive home, is they're trusting you with how they feed their family.
Absolutely. And it's just one incident that could ruin the entire MSP's reputation and business. Mm-hmm. So protecting themselves with something like the trust mark only helps them better their marketing, their sales, better present themselves.
Their muscles.
Yeah. Exactly. Take care of their clients. I think it goes a long way. I mean, obviously I'm biased because this is what I do, but I would never hire a company that doesn't, show me how they're secure and are doing things appropriately. And it's going to come into effect when we get to later in the address phase with the client, and we're working on shared responsibility matrices and business impact assessments and risk management.
Why don't we do this, actually, Alex? You have a wealth of knowledge. Let's help define those. Let's take a few minutes. Let's go back through what in your mind is a shared responsibility matrix. For any MSP out there, an SRM or a shared responsibility matrix, let's define that. What is it?
The clear outline of who is doing what with regards to specific responsibilities and tasks. So clearly defining, so in my case, the first one I make is what is the MSP doing, what is the end client doing, and what am I doing? So I'm writing the policies and the procedures. The end client has to review those policies and procedures, and the MSP has to give the technical input and resources to go into those policies and procedures and implement the things that the policies and procedures say with regards to technology. And then it's my job to help distribute those policies and procedures and help enforce those policies and procedures. So it could go on and on.
I know. And that's why I brought up SRM is when you start thinking about this, Dom, I'm going to ask you, when you talk about you as an MSP, your client as a client consumer, when you are patching, when you're doing something in 7.x and you're patching their machines, is that purely your responsibility as the MSP, Dom?
Nope.
They're shared.
I needed to work with that. I need to work with that customer to establish what's our regular patching cadence and how do we react to another perfect 10 vulnerability and what is the procedure around that? How do we react if we let's say I'm patching your server at 2 a.m. and it doesn't come back? Who can I call to go to the building and fix your server? Right? There's so many different elements that just go into applying patching. Now, I'm not saying I had them all thought out, but I'm saying if I went back and did it today, I would.
Yeah. Yeah. And from a shared responsibility, what I was getting at is I'm dependent on that customer perhaps leaving machines on if I want to patch. Yeah. I'm dependent on that customer perhaps saying that I'm going to pay for my SmartNet updates for my Cisco switches so I'm not left in a place where I can't update them, right? I've never stolen from another customer's account to install
or dumb random line of business software where they don't want to buy the support,
right.
There's so much of that.
And so what I'm getting at is that we think that we're defining policies, and the nature is we have to move towards shared responsibility of this understanding. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Alex. What were some of the other things that you said you get into in those later phases with people? I think there were several of them that were great to
let's talk BIAs. I love those. I think most people don't understand them.
Uh-oh, Alex just perked up. We're in trouble. Go.
I could definitely talk about them all day, but it's understanding like your risk matrix. So, identifying what risks are to your specific business, because obviously it's different for every single business. No two businesses are exactly the same. So whether that's physical, fire, flood, those kinds of things, or what an IT incident or breach looks like, and defining that for their business, to everything else that could possibly go wrong, like the key bridge collapsing and how that affects your business, or you should have tried pandemic planning with a lot of my clients pre-2020. It was like, that'll never happen. That's not something we ever have to worry about, even though we're a hospital.
You just pulled me on I had an advisor. I had an Alex. I had already hired an Alex, Anil, and they called me and said, Matt, I need you to learn a term called social distancing, and it's going to need to be part of how you give people time off and how they deal with their health problems. And I was just like, no way. Like, we're not putting this in our policy. Tony Miller was working with them, getting like words in our policies, in our HR manuals to allow. And so, to your point, Alex, we were on the receiving side of that going, this is a joke here, right, y'all? Like, come on, this isn't going to happen. And then it did. And we had to use those policies and we had to do all those things. And so we were very happy for our Alex Spigel in that situation back in 2019, or 2020, early 2020. But yeah, good call out. So going down that path, business impact analysis. Yeah.
Yeah, it's evaluating all of the risks inside of your business and really making that list and every possible situation that you can think of, and then identifying how that would impact your business. And from there, we usually add it to a business continuity plan. So if X,
or a
then
BCP.
Y.
I'm getting the points on this one.
Yes.
A BCP.
Does it count though if you say the term before the acronym? I feel like that's.
Oh, you're gonna put rules in this, Dom? I can't just steal the game. This is horrible.
It's a little edgy.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Alex gets the point. Fine.
But then the most fun is the tabletop exercises that come with it. So you're really testing these risks and seeing how the business would survive and thrive in these specific situations. So you're saying if there was an incident, how would that incident be handled? How would XYZ be done? The most prevalent in my world right now is vendor risk, and having very
third
strong
party
vendor and third party policies and procedures. I have a client that's a benefits administrator, and last at CCF, my team member Sarah was up presenting about
I love her,
tabletop exercises and business impact assessments, and I literally get a Slack message that their vendor had an incident, and they print their explanation of benefits, their EOBs. So that's contains their end user EPHI and PII, that personal identifiable information, and the client's like, what do I do? What would happen if they weren't organized, right? So I would just go, okay, here's your vendor management policy. Here's what it says in your business associate agreement or your BAA, and here's how we're going to handle it. This is what your shared responsibility says. So we're organized. We're able to handle these things quickly and educate our clients and their clients then on the matter, right? Because they have to know that their data was compromised. But what would people do if they weren't organized? If they didn't have these things ready to go, that's where the tabletop exercises come in handy, because it makes your incident response, disaster recovery, business continuity planning so much stronger and better.
And feeds back into your decision on which vendors to partner with, and feeds back into which parts of my trust side of that, when I work with these vendors, how do I trust that they are doing those things that will help me maintain resiliency, right? And when you think about this, in some of the tabletops I've played, we're working through, I had a concrete company that delivers these massive, big, poor jobs. And in big, poor jobs, you have to have a concrete truck coming every 30 minutes to go dump the next set of concrete literally every 30 minutes or the whole port could be scrapped, right? It has this one integritous piece. And so in their case, they needed to have their Trimble all-track service that told them when concrete trucks were coming, what ash plant they were at. They needed to have the information about their ERP of what ash and concrete and amounts were available in those stacks. They needed to have weather information that was being brought in. And they had several key systems that were part of that. And we emulated and talked through failures in some of those critical things, whether it be through third party to your kind of conversation or whether it be first party problems of their own challenges and as an incident. And to see business leaders' faces as they understand, what do you mean I can't get concrete trucks there? I have a $1.2 million penalty on this pour right now, and I can't do it. What would I do to solve this? How can I? No. I know you have 4 more trucks. We can't get them there. You're radioing them on a backup to try to do it, and the timing isn't working. The concrete, like, taking it away from them in that way, Alex, does that change the message when you bring tabletops to their real business from an impact perspective and actually make it real?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I try to come up with as real life scenarios as possible, but I also ask them to take it seriously. Like,
sure,
pandemic planning pre-2020. Like, please just think about this and pretend like it's real and live in the moment. That's a huge thing that we ask for when we go into clients and do tabletop exercises.
Yeah, the live in the moment part, right? Like, it's a role-playing game, dang it. You got to role-play. And so it's awesome. What's funny is, past, and then Dom, I'll let you close us out here in a minute, but I'm also just left doing for 24 MSPs, a tabletop exercise, walking them through a simulation as if all their clients had been encrypted. It was their fault. It was their systems. They're having to store. Yeah, the game, right? It's one of the games we made, and Dom's seen it and played it. In fact, he said, what did you say to me, Dom, when you read the first set of 7 or 8 slides? I don't think you were very nice to me.
I don't remember.
It was something like, that's evil.
It was holy shit something. It was, something.
Yeah. That's blank. But we're seeing MSPs go through tabletops. I'd ask you this last, and I'll put it on you, Alex, to just answer this. Do you feel like in your time doing this, because you've been doing this for a few years for sure, have MSPs matured? Have you seen a growth in their maturation?
Yes. When I started this business 7 years ago, we had to add specific security tools to our stack because they didn't have a SIM. They didn't have continuous vulnerability scanners. They didn't have a lot of these tools and resources. So I felt the need to add them so that I could resell them to them so that I didn't have to do R&D every single time. Now they're coming to the table with a lot of these things and a lot more advanced security tools and that security 2.0. It's not where I want to see them and where I want them to be, but they are more mature than they were.
That is reinforcing. Dom, close us out. Alex, I love you. Thank you for being
here. So we do have one question in the chat for you, Alex.
One more.
It's a real hard one.
Great.
Are you gonna be joining us at Beyond in June?
I was not planning on it, but I will consider it.
Just got called out.
Figure that out.
We're gonna have to see you in June. Yeah.
I also have one more question, Alex. This is like the last few days. I mean, we have 2 or 3 more days of Women's History Month. Is there anything you'd like to say about that? I mean, you lead a lot of these efforts with CompTIA and some of the other things that you've been involved in, but anything to say? Last couple of days of Women's History Month.
We need to see more women in tech and cybersecurity and compliance. This is a field for everyone. There is plenty of room for women here, and they are needed. We think differently than men, and we are absolutely critical in this space. And I would love to
and
see
join us. We have cookies as well, so please join us.
We do have cookies.
Absolutely.
Alex, I respect you, and I really am honored to get to work with you. You were Person of the Year for CompTIA last year as well, and I think you said that reign's coming to an end here soon. But I can't think of somebody else I'd rather put on a pedestal for all the work that has been done, and I'm blessed to get to work with you. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. I feel very, very much the same way about you and admire and respect you greatly. Thank you guys so much for having me today. This was so fun.
Alex, thanks so much for being on the show. Man, the amount of value add we just talked about for your MSP and what you can deliver to your customers in the last hour is kind of mind-blowing. Make sure you watch it back, because building that kind of relationship with your customers can go a huge distance in the growth of your MSP. That's our show for the week.
And I'm allowed to say
Thanks so
this,
much.
partner with Alex. reach out to Alex.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah,
are
please
looking for
partner
that
to
type of
Alex.
relationship, she does this for a living. Okay, that's the only plug. Swear to God, Dom.
Her
Don't
info's down below. Go find it. I'm sure there's a LinkedIn. I'm not sure what else is down there, but connect with Alex, ask her questions, and start thinking about this as a tool in your toolbox. Thanks so much for joining us. That's your story for the week. Next week, we're going to have Greg Kutzbach on the show. We're going to talk about the intricacies of cloud incidents, and I think we're going to play a little bit of Who Done It, because him and I kind of started that on LinkedIn, and we decided we got to continue down the game. So it's going to be a great conversation. Join us next Friday. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you then.